Hi, this is Paul from DisabilityReel, and this week on DisabilityReel, I'm interviewing Mikecicle, who's sharing his journey with Aspergers. Mike's kindly sharing his journey with us so that we can bring it to you. Stay tuned. Mike, just give us a little overview about yourself and about your YouTube channel.
Well, as pretty much anybody that's seen this channel or my channel, they'll know I am Mikecicle. My channel is basically doing video game Let's Plays and also to mainly help those with mental disabilities that may be going through some trouble in their lives. And I provide my experiences with my disability, which of course is Asperger syndrome. It's mainly a social disability because one of the issues that I had growing up with the disability was keeping eye contact or just being able to talk normally around complete strangers. And so far, it's been a very long journey, and I'm really glad to be here with you to talk about it.
Well, I'm glad you're here to share it with me as well, Mike. And you know, the point of what we're doing here as part of DisabilityReel is taking journeys exactly similar to yours and sharing them with people. And it's just the point of these interviews will be to say, you know, that you can be very defeatist, and you can take negatives from disabilities and society and the news and the media, do plenty to portray disability in that mindset. But actually, I think the people I've come across who are faced with disability in whatever form or whatever guise are some of the strongest, and most courageous and the most inspired people for overcoming those challenges and striving to push themselves on. And so, that's where, interviewing yourself, Mike, and sharing your journey, I think is really going to help, inform other people who are on the journey and also experiences with others who aren't on the journey as well. So, Mike, just give me a rundown, if you can, in terms of the diagnosis of Asperger's and how old you were and what the impact was to your family at first.
Well, when I was 4 years old, that's when my family started to find out that there were some issues I was having. I was in preschool at the time at my church, and I wasn't getting along with any kids. I would tend to be sitting at a table by myself, just drawing or doing any sort of projects just on my own because I would be afraid of the other kids, and I would only talk to the adults that were there. And the teachers that were there were, how can I say this? They were a bit concerned about what might be going on, and they brought it up to my mother and my father, who were actually married at the time. Unfortunately, they're divorced now. And they took me to the hospital to do some testing. And at first, I was diagnosed with ADD, which is short for attention deficit disorder. But then further in the 90s, they re-diagnosed me with Asperger syndrome because they started to realize that there was not only the social awkwardness, but there was also the problems with having attentions to detail and just being able to do certain things that I couldn't do as a kid that I'm able to do now.
Okay, so so initially when you had your diagnosis, what were your thoughts and feelings on that at the time? Did it feel like it was right for you now that you understand it better, or what were your thoughts and feelings at the time?
Well, at that time, I was just a kid. I didn't really know what was going on, but my parents gave me full disclosure because they didn't want to hide anything from me. So they wanted to make sure I knew everything that was going on. And the funny thing is, when I was first diagnosed with Asperger's, they actually told my mother, the doctors told her that I wouldn't be able to live on my own. I wouldn't be able to read. I basically wouldn't be able to live a full life on my own, which was very, very sad news for my mother. And I can remember the day that I was diagnosed, like very vaguely, she had tears in her eyes from learning that news. But deep down in her heart, I remember she told me on my 10th birthday that she had this very strong feeling that she would find a way to um, help me advance in my life, even though I had this disability. And she would try to find as much help as possible, despite all of my shortcomings. And to this very day, I couldn't be happier with the fact that my parents tried their very best to find the help that they could to get me where I am now. Because I went through a lot of therapy, which took about 14 years roughly of my life. It was probably when I was around 5 or 6 years old when I started, and it was about 13 or 14 when I stopped seeing my first therapist. And it was kind of like on and off therapy from my teen years up until I turned 20. So it was a very challenging road, especially the social aspect of it, because with Asperger syndrome, there's that social awkwardness. And with the social awkwardness, there's a lot of trouble with talking to strangers, trying to keep eye contact, like I mentioned before. But now it's second nature to me, and I'm actually really glad that I'm even able to do an interview like this with you right now. It's an amazing thing how far I've come.
No, absolutely. And I want to come back as well a little bit later on in terms of the therapies and the things which, were tried and were applied, and the things that failed and the things that worked and have been a success. I think that's something maybe we could pick up a little later on as well in the conversation, because I think there were some salient points to pick up. But just going back to the point of diagnosis, obviously your mum, and I'll use the term grieving period, received, the Purges and went through her own grief process. There seems to be something about the way that, medical professionals deliver that news to parents and to individuals, and have this amazing knack for painting negative pictures. And,
Yeah.
it's one of those where it makes you wonder, is that where all the negativity comes from in terms of disability, and how people perceive disability? Because of the way they deliver that initial negative, you're not going to be able to do this, you won't be able to do that. And, I think time and time again, people, prove it over and over and over again, that actually the prognosis given by the doctors really worth that much at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I mean, my own son has a condition, and we were given some news. He won't walk, he won't talk, he won't feed himself, he'll never ride a bike, he'll never be able to swim. And okay, at this point in our journey, he can't do some of those, but he can do some. And I think sometimes you've just got to take a back step from some of the more negative aspects of what the normal or typical child might be, and just say,
Oh, yes.
Whatever they are, we're going to shift those milestones. We're going to move them. Okay, he can't walk now, but rather than pushing him too hard, we'll take it in step by step. There's the irony. So in terms of your grieving, your mum grieving, was there any impact as well on your dad in terms of how your dad perceived yourself? Did that change anything in terms of your relationships, in terms of your family?
Well, my father was impacted just about the same as my mother. I mean, unfortunately, the divorce didn't really help either. I was concerned that the divorce was them arguing over me at one time, but my parents tried to put it to me straight that it had nothing to do with me or my sister when we were growing up. It was just there was no spark between them, and they had a lot of problems in their own emotional state between each other. So when it came to me growing up with my family separated, it was pretty difficult. And for probably a couple of years, my parents were alone, and the hardships of trying to help me with my disability wasn't much help on my family either. And I kind of feel bad that some of the stuff I put them through when I was growing up kind of caused them just more problems on top of their own. But I'm, really glad that they set aside their own problems to handle mine and my sisters, because we definitely went through a lot with the therapy I went through. And most recently, my father's been trying to help me with finances, because I am just absolutely terrible with money. And I have been put on medication that actually does help, because I know there's a lot of controversy about some people wanting to do therapy or wanting to do medication. And I've actually thought about doing a video about that for quite some time, but I never really had the chance to talk about it.
So, and I think we can maybe touch upon that as well as we begin to progress through the interview as well. So you're facing some challenges. You've had the diagnosis of Aspergers. The family unit isn't in, I suppose, what you could say is equilibrium. How was school relationships and friendships for you growing up from when you were younger? Was the Aspergers part of this identity that people had associated with you, or actually was that never brought into the conversation, and the friendships you had were just normal friendships that people weren't aware and didn't even care?
Oh my Lord. I can't even begin to tell you all the trouble I went through at school. I mean, grade school was probably the worst next to junior high, because when I was in grade school, I mean, you know how little kids are. They can be like really mean at a young age. I went through a very long time in grade school where I was a big loner. I would be doing things on my own, and I just wouldn't want to talk to anybody. And the only real friends I had were the teachers and the staff of the school. And a lot of the kids, some of them were like slightly older than me, maybe by a year, or I might be older than them, because I was actually held back for a year. I didn't start kindergarten until I was 6. So there were some people that actually made fun of me because I was held back. And there was this one girl I actually knew back in those days. She was nice to me. We became like good friends in terms of her mother finding out the problems that I had. And she actually worked alongside my mom with a couple of things. And when her daughter and I were spending time at school talking to each other every now and again, we would just have a wonderful time just getting to know each other. And we've actually hung out a couple of times. And by the time I was in 3rd grade, I found out that she was going to be held back because her grades slipped. So it was very unfortunate that I wasn't going to have a really good friend of mine with me in future grades. But as the years progressed in grade school up to 6th grade, the bullying got worse. And despite the struggles I dealt with homework when I was in the earlier grades, because I used to spend literally hours upon hours on just one piece of homework, and it was terrible. It would be to the point where I'd be crying, and I just would feel so hopeless that I wouldn't be able to get through school. But my parents just refused to give up on me. They would not. They wouldn't let me down. They would make sure that they would try their absolute best to help me with that. And by the time I got to fourth grade, my grades were getting better. I was able to get homework done probably in less than half an hour. And I still had trouble making friends because I lost the one friend I had up to the third grade. But as I said, the bullying got much worse. And there was actually one time that, pardon me, there was a time that we were having recess after lunch, and I don't know what we had, but the dessert that we had was Jello, and my father was actually there attending to have lunch with me because he had the day off from work at that time. And one of the kids that I was in sixth grade with, he just thought it would be funny if he ran up to me from behind me and he slammed Jello on the back of my head, and I got red Jello that was coming down my neck, and it got all over my shirt. But fortunately, my father saw the whole thing, and he spoke to one of the staff members about what happened, and fortunately justice was served. But still, it was a traumatic experience, just, you know, being treated like that. And that's something that I've dealt with up until probably high school, where I was constantly being bullied, and it was a very rough path for me. It really was.
What do what do you tell yourself, Mike? And what do parents tell you in terms of how to handle and how to deal, with that kind of bullying? What's the advice they give?
Well, in terms of bullying advice, there wasn't really much that I can remember, but I do remember that every time that I had a bullying problem, I would always go to somebody that had, more authority than me, like the principal or something. And there was actually a situation in junior high where I was being bullied by a short kid. Funny enough, because he was shorter than me by probably almost a foot, and I just couldn't believe I was being bullied by this guy. And there was just one time where I was in gym class. I think it was in the ninth grade, and we had a substitute teacher at the time, and we were supposed to just play dodgeball because our regular teacher was out sick, I believe. And the teacher was taking a nap on a chair, and he wasn't watching anything that was going on, which absolutely just blew my mind. And oh my God, what happened next? This kid got most of my class to gang up on me and just pummel me with dodgeballs. And it didn't matter whether I was in the game or out of the game. They would keep hitting me with dodgeballs even when I wasn't looking. And I still remember the bruises that I got from that day. And I had a bruise that was on my arm. There was, I think, a big one on my leg. And I can't remember, but I think I had like a minor concussion because I got hit really hard in the head. But at the end of the class, there was this burning rage that just flared up inside me. And that kid, well, I went into the locker room when we were getting changed, and when he turned around to look at me, I clenched my hand and literally just like hit him really hard in the face. I don't remember whether I broke a bone or not, but he was bleeding out his nose. And he was knocked out for a couple of minutes, and people were trying to wake him up. And next thing I know, I'm like, oh my God, what the hell did I just do? And I quickly get changed, and I rush down to the principal's office to tell him what happened. And then when everything was all said and done, I ended up getting detention in the same room as the guy that I punched, which, was a really stupid idea on the principal's part. And when I went on my first day of detention, I went into the room and I said, I never had detention before, so I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I went into the room and I said, is this where detention's being held? And then that kid I hit in the face, he goes, no, this is the chess club. And then I start walking out, and then the whole classroom starts laughing at me, and he goes, oh my God, Mike, you are such a fucking idiot. And then the teacher that was watching after all the people in detention, he escorted him to the principal's office. And because of, him messing with me and saying that kind of language in front of the teacher, and so I just took a seat and I sat through the hour that I was in detention. But it was just, it was probably one of the many most unbelievable moments of my life that I just wish I could just crumble up like a piece of paper and just throw it in the trash,
Goodness me, that's a surprising story, and I think is we all have our own instances of bullying or victims of bullying. That's one of the more shocking ones I've heard as well. And you would like to think also that teachers themselves have made through concerted education of the teaching authorities and bullying authorities and organizations to say that that's not the best way to handle it. And actually, I think, Mike, what you did was fully justified, and kudos to you, fella, honestly.
But yeah, that's what my parents told me. They, specifically my father and my father and my stepfather both said that what I did was fully justified because I was defending myself. But my mother was completely horrified because she thought, violence is never the answer. But the principal that I had at the time in junior high, he was doing absolutely nothing to solve all my bullying issues with him for over 3 years. So something had to be done. And I guess what happened back then was God's way of allowing me to, finally let loose.
I don't blame you, and if that was my son, I'd be exactly the same as your father. And I know my wife would also act the same way that your mum did as well, which would be acting utter horror. But behind closed doors, I'm pretty sure she's like, if I was there, I would have killed him, I would have broke his neck, or I would have broke his arms and legs. So I'm pretty sure all mums are the same as well. Now, yeah, I noticed, Mike, you mentioned earlier regards a sister. You've got a sister in your family. I have a very keen interest in terms of sibling relationships with people who have a form of disability. Is she very supportive of you? What's your sister like in terms of your condition, and what's your relationship with each other like?
Well, I'd say for my sister, she's 3 years older than me, but she's actually leading a more successful life than I am, which I'm kind of jealous about that. She's been married for 3 years, and she's on her way to having triplets. She's about 19 weeks pregnant, and I couldn't be happier for her. But she also has a master's degree in school psychology, and I think she did tell me at one time that it was me that inspired her to want to take part in something like that, because she wanted to be able to help children in need. And I honestly believe that she was really good at something like that. Back in the day when we were kids, oh my God, we we were like polar opposites. We would not get along with each other, and we fought and fought and fought. And up until we were teenagers, we still were pretty immature. And by the time Lisa got to college, that was when she met her husband, and oh my God, he's the sweetest guy, and he and I get along so well, and I'm really lucky to have him as a brother-in-law. And I actually can't believe I'm gonna be an uncle in a couple of months. It's something I actually am really looking forward to, because even though my sister and I didn't really have much of a good sibling relationship growing up, we still care very much about each other. I care very much about her. She cares very much about me. And if something should happen to my parents, then my sister was more than happy to say to my father and my mother, I'll look after him. I'll make sure that he handles his money okay, and that everything goes good with his life growing up. And I've also got my girlfriend as well, who is very supportive of everything. And the funny thing is, she's got the same disability as I do, but she actually could use a little bit of work herself.
It sounds like you've got a fantastic sister there. And I was on another interview last night with another family with Angelman syndrome. And the sister was acting almost as if she was the mom of the child. She was very pragmatic, very much I'll go and fight the corner and I'll deal with it. And should something happen to mum, or when something happens to mum, he's coming living with me. And I think sibling relationships, especially where there's a disability involved, are very, very fascinating things, because it can go in a variety of directions, in a variety of ways. Sometimes they can tend to distance themselves from the family because they don't want to burden themselves, and they don't want to burden the family with some of the problems that they as individuals have. And in other occasions, like yours, we can move closer together, and take on, and that's fantastic. And so it sounds like you've got a great family all around you, Mike.
Yeah, I've got quite a bit of a family. Along with my mother's family and my father's family, they actually both got remarried. I've got my mother, my stepfather, my sister, my stepbrother Alex, who he's actually been very supportive of me over the years. When we were in high school together, he and his friends looked after me, and they tried to make sure that nobody bullied me as much as possible. And I've, of course, got my father and my stepmother, and I've got quite a few grandparents on both sides who are very supportive as well. They've probably been the easiest people for me to talk to outside of my parents, because every now and again there would probably be there were times when I wanted to talk to someone besides my parents, and every now and again I would try to get a hold of my grandparents to try to see their point of view on things. And they'd be a little more easygoing than my parents were sometimes, because in certain situations my parents would they would be a little oh man, I can't even describe it. There were certain occasions where I've made some really bad choices, and my family wasn't like really too fond of them. But there were times I would turn to people outside of my parents, my grandparents, or maybe distant friends, because even though I had trouble making friends growing up, there were still at least one or two people that I've known in my life that I could actually trust with my life, and I still keep in contact with those people to this very day. And they would always provide their point of view on things. And I'm actually very fortunate to have such a large support system, especially with my girlfriend that lives with me. She's actually in the room right behind me. I kind of asked her to give us a little privacy because I figured it was best for us to, have this interview completely between us. I would definitely love to have her in the interview, but I don't know if that would be any issue in terms of, interrupting the interview in any way.
No, not at all. We can do and grab her out a little later, absolutely. And maybe she could have an interview of her own next time as well.
Oh, sweet! That sounds great.
So let's just go back then. You've got a fantastic support network all around you, and let's just talk a little bit more now about the Aspergers itself. Now, in terms of I suppose the term is an Aspie attack. Have you had Aspie attacks? What do they consist of, and what kind of what tools do you have in your toolkit which help you or help your family members in terms of controlling these attacks?
Well, I've actually never really experienced Aspie attacks, but this is actually the first time I'm ever hearing of such a thing. But there have been a lot of times where I've thrown aggressive fits over a lot of things that were like really insignificant, and that's one of the reasons why I'm on medication, and it helps me stay calm. And it, not like, those people that, smoke weed and they're like, oh my God, I'm so high. but, mainly those times when I'd be in like huge fits of rage, and that's just my girlfriend walking by. But yeah, if I would be in, there would be times when I'd be in fits of rage, like I mentioned before, over little itty bitty insignificant things, and that was probably what most affected my family, and I deeply regret putting through my family all through those ridiculous fits of rage. And I keep saying to my parents, we should have done something with this medication sooner, and life would have been so much better for us. And my excuse for my parents for that was, well, we didn't know anything at the time. We didn't know what to do at that time. We didn't realize that it was something that could be treated. So, excuse me, being on this medication I'm on right now helps with the fits of rage that I would have. And it also, like I said, it keeps me calm, and it actually also helps me to think more clearly, so that, I can, if I'm in a situation where I could get like super aggressive about something, I can, take the time to, really think, how should I handle this situation? And is this or that idea the best way to go about it?
And are there key triggers for yourself, Mike? And what is that medication that you're taking?
Well, the name of the medication is Depakote, but I take a generic version of it. I forget what it's called, but yeah, the name of the medication is Depakote, and I wouldn't say it's for every Aspie that has rage problems, but I would definitely recommend that if there's someone who's got Asperger's syndrome and they have anger problems where they get angry over the simplest thing, then it's something that I recommend looking into, most definitely.
Awesome, absolutely awesome. And so just going back, earlier in the conversation we were talking about the therapies, and you talked about the medication and all of that kind of stuff. What kind of therapy, were you put through? What kinds of exercises did you have you working on? Was it group therapy? Was it individual? What kinds of things what was your experience in terms of your therapies?
Well, the first type of therapy I went through was speech therapy, and that was mainly because with the social awkwardness of Asperger syndrome, there were a lot of times that I would not understand certain things that were certain sayings, like a couch potato or I'm all ears. And they would have like these funny activities to, help you figure out, what those meanings mean. Like, for instance, the term couch potato, I remember there was this picture of a potato literally sitting on a couch watching television, and the nice thing about it is they interpret the picture as what the meaning behind the phrase really is, that a couch potato is somebody that just sits around, does nothing but one thing for a really long period of time. And the I'm all ears phrase, I kid you not, the the picture I saw for that was a guy that had ears all over his head, and I could pretty much figure out from that picture that that means that you're listening closely to whatever the person has to say to you. So speech therapy was mainly me learning to understand the English language, and also figuring out ways to start conversations with people and knowing the right thing to say when I'm in certain situations. But that only lasted for about the first 10 years after I was diagnosed, when I was 4 years old. Because when I turned into my teen years, my therapist ended up getting a different office, and she changed her schedule around. And unfortunately, I couldn't see her anymore because of that. So for about, oh my God, roughly about 14 up to about 17 or 18, I was completely out of therapy. But when I turned about 18 or 19 years old, when I was close to getting out of high school, I met with another therapist that was going to help me more on my social problems rather than on my speech skills, if that makes any sense. And she was actually really helpful. I got the chance to work with her for about 2 or 3 years, and she helped me to she figured out ways to help me with social and very close social interactions, and she helped me to improve things as such as eye contact with strangers, and just being able to figure out the right things to say in front of a person without hurting anybody's feelings, or having certain words misinterpreted. And I can't thank her enough for helping me get to that point, because if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have been able to live out on my own when I was in college, because college was 4 oh my God, I can't even talk right. It was it was 4 hours away from home. I was in Pittsburgh at the Art Institute there studying film and visual effects, which is one of the things that got me into YouTube. And when I started going to college, there would be times that when I would come home from college that I would meet with this therapist to fill her in on my progress with my social skills. And the nice thing is she would give me like little piece of homework that would be ways that I could practice different skills in terms of striking conversations with my peers and in my classes, and trying to get involved in the community. And I think that's one of the reasons that led to me thinking that if I spoke out and spread the word about my disability and spread the word about autism awareness and trying to help those that are struggling with disabilities, I think that could be a huge impact on a lot of people. And that's what led me to creating the Mikecicle channel.
I think that's awesome. And I interpret that rightly or wrongly, Mike. It's just your little way of giving back everything that you've learned as part of your journey and trying to pass that on. And I think that's really, really awesome. And, me and my channel is trying to do that, for a broader spectrum of conditions, but I think that's admirable, Mike, indeed. I think that's brilliant.
Well, thank you. That means a lot.
Have you thought about doing something, more full-time, like going through education, becoming a therapist or a support worker in your own right?
Honestly, I've never really thought about it, but when I was in college, I actually did take psychology classes, and I figured that would actually help me to better understand how I can approach certain people and understand certain mental and physical disabilities that people have. And I took that for, I think it was 3 different classes that I took, but I took all of them, and I had the same teacher every single time. And the nice thing about my teacher was that if we ever needed to talk to her about something, because she was a certified psychiatrist, we could meet with her after our classes and talk to her. And that was the greatest thing about taking those classes. And I don't regret taking those classes at all. They were a huge help in helping me understand people with other disabilities. And the funny thing is, the part-time job I'm at right now, I actually work with quite a few people that have all sorts of different disabilities. And I think it kind of challenges me to figure out ways to approach them. And I've actually had a little bit of trouble trying to figure out certain ways to approach them, but one way or another, I always seem to find a way. And I seem to get along with people pretty well because I try the best I can to be an approachable and friendly person, because the last thing I want to do is try to turn someone away by something that I said that may be misinterpreted, which, was one of the reasons why having therapy in my background was a big help too.
When I was interviewing somebody previously, about their own journey and about, some of the, shall I say, reasons or excuses of things that they might say to people, or the apologies that they might offer for something that they've said,
Mm-hmm.
I then span that around and said, but it's up to us as individuals to own our journey, whether we upset people or not. And I think, it was a very salient point, because sometimes you just got to say what it is and just hope and pray that nobody takes offense by it. You know, I don't think anybody deliberately sets out to hurt anybody's feelings or to say something that's going to cause somebody some upset. But, you know, just to own your own journey, own yourself, and be the best, you know, that you can. And, you know, if other people interpret it the other way, then, you know, I can say sorry for that. And you know, I will say sorry for my own actions and for where it does hurt people. But sometimes you've just got to say what you've got to say.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay, so let's go now. I've noticed you're living in your own place, Mike. You know, tell me about the decision regarding into living in your own place and moving out of the family home.
Well, the decision for me to move out happened about a year after I graduated college, which was December of 2012 when I graduated. I was living with my father for about 6 months, and this was before I started going on the Depakote medication. And there would be a lot of times where my father and my stepmother and I would be arguing over ridiculous stuff. But I gotta say, quite honestly, seeing my father and my stepmother argue is probably a sketch comedy show all on its own. They argue over the stupidest stuff, but it's funny to watch. But when I was reaching the point where I really wanted to have my own place, there was a next door neighbor that we had. They were very elderly, and my stepmother was taking care of them. God bless her heart. She was taking care of them for quite some time, but then they had to get split up because I think it was there was some issues with him being able to support himself living on his own, and my stepmother was just having trouble spending 24 hours a day trying to take care of him because he would get up in the middle of the night for the most ridiculous things. And like he would get up at like 2 a.m. and the lights would be on, and he would want to go out to his car, and he said that he would want to go to the drugstore to get his medication or something like that. And my stepmother would be like, I'm sorry, but it's 2 a.m. The drugstore's not open right now, and you need to get your sleep. But it got to the point where he had to be put into a how can I put this? He had to be placed in a special facility because of his condition. He was losing his memory, and I think he was showing signs of dementia. He was 90-something years old. So, unfortunately, he got separated from his wife, and his wife was mad at my stepmother for quite some time because she thought that she was taking her husband away, and she wasn't cooperating for quite some time. But then her memory started to go, and then there were a couple of times where she'd be over at the house and she would be like, "Would you like to go see your husband today?" And she would just be all confused, like, "I have a husband, I'm married." And, you know, I felt kind of bad that, you know, they're at that age and they wouldn't even remember each other. But I'm getting a little too much off topic here. Point being, both of them passed away shortly after they got separated, and the house was going to be given to my stepmother because she was taking care of them for I think about 3 or 4 years, and she said that she needed someone to maintain the house until she could find a way to sell it because she wasn't going to be able to keep it. So um, she said, "Would you be okay with, you know, living across the street? Because that way you'll have your own place, and if you ever need anything, we're just right across the street." So I thought, that sounds like a really neat idea. So that was actually the first time I ever got the chance to live in my own personal space. And I must have lived in that house for probably another 6 months until about, I think it was June or May or June of 2013 or 2014, actually, that at that point I decided to find an apartment because my father and my stepmother had finally decided to start selling it and renovating the house. So over the course of this past year and a half, they were renovating that house and trying to sell it. And when they finally sold it, they actually sold their house along with this house, and all that money that they bundled together, they built their own house about a couple towns away. Cost about, oh my God, probably anywhere between $300,000 to $400,000. And they met with this really nice contractor and builder, and they now live in this really nice house up on this hill with a nice view of the mountains. And I've just been living in this apartment for the past year and a half. And for those past 6 months, my father and stepmother have been living in that new house. And every now and again, I would visit them, and my father would also visit me. And there would be mainly a lot of times where I'd call him up for certain favors. Like if I needed money for something, I would need to get his approval for it. And things worked out pretty well for quite some time when I was here by myself. But it was about maybe a year or so after I moved in here that I met my current girlfriend, Nancy. And she's probably going to hear every word I say because she's just in the room behind me. But she's the sweetest person I've ever met. And I just find it so weird that we have the same exact disability. And it makes me feel like, when we interact with each other, oh my God, I'm talking to myself just in female form. And the nice thing about Nancy is that she loves me no matter what I do, no matter what I say. She just refuses to let go of me. And she I can't even begin to describe how amazing she is. And I'm very lucky to have met a person like her, and I'm lucky to have her as a roommate too, even though she goes through quite a bit of food.
Oh, I'm sure she'll thank you for that when she watches this back.
Probably.
So you moved into your own blokes pad there. You've got Nancy who's with you now. Tell me about how you and Nancy met, and tell me, maybe even before Nancy, you don't have to go into too much detail, but what was it like trying to find, relationships beforehand, when you were prior to Nancy?
Well, the search kind of started about a few months after I moved in. I started to realize how alone I was in the area. I know I only live about 15 minutes away from my father and about maybe 5 or 10 from my mother. I was trying really hard to find somebody. I was trying to figure out where I could find out about social events so I could start hanging out with people outside of my apartment. But the sad thing is, I live in such a small area that trying to find social events is pretty scarce. And the only thing I could resort to was online dating to see if I could find girls that were within my area. But the saddest thing is that I ended up looking for girls that were mainly in places like Scranton, which is like an hour away from where I am, and Kutztown, which is about half an hour, and I think Pottstown, which is another half an hour away. So it took me about probably 5 unsuccessful dates until I found Nancy. I was about ready to give up when I was going on like 5 different dating sites that were supposedly free. And I was on this website called POF, which is short for plenty of fish, because of that term. Oh, there's plenty of fish in the sea, yada, yada, yada. Yeah, well, in, in my case, I'm like, that's a bunch of bullshit. But when I first met Nancy, I noticed that she was a little bit nervous, very, very shy. She kind of for those that might watch this interview and are fans of the anime series Naruto, she is a lot like this this character Hinata, who actually is deeply and greatly in love with Naruto, who's the main character of the series. And sometimes I kind of see his life very similar to mine, because he has like this curse that he can't ever seem to get rid of. But he's got this one person in his life that undeniably loves and cares about him, but just is too shy to say anything. And that's kind of what I compare Nancy to. But that's something that came like a little further into our relationship, probably a few months down the road. But we first met at the Berkshire Mall, which is, it's kind of a famous hangout area in around where I live. And Nancy and I met in the food court, and we kind of shook hands and said, "Hi, how are you doing?" And she was wearing a Batman wristband, and I think she was wearing her Batman t-shirt at the time. And I could tell, oh my God, she's a comic book freak like me. But
keeper.
But the nice thing was, as we went from store to store, we kept finding out more things about us that we had in common. Like, she had a big love of horror movies, but a few years ago, you couldn't even get me to watch a horror movie, because I'd be more into comedy and the real wacky stuff, and the action adventure kind of things, and stuff like the Batman trilogy and the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies like Iron Man, Captain America, the Hulk, and so on and so forth. I could go on forever talking about that stuff. But it got to the point where it was like 2 hours into our date, and Nancy and I decided to take it easy and sit by the water fountain that was outside of the Sears in the mall. And oh my God, the look on Nancy's face, it was she Not only was she nervous, but she was just really afraid that she wasn't going to find somebody, and she was really worried that our date was going to be a waste of time. And I felt so bad for her, but I may have made things go a little bit too fast when we were sitting there. I saw her crying, and I was like, "Oh my God, what do I do?" And the only thing I could think of to do was to just hold her in my arms as tight as I could, just to try to comfort her, because she had a bit of a troubled past with previous boyfriends. But I probably shouldn't put any disclosure on that, because I'm sure she wouldn't like me to talk about that. But it got to the point where she was saying how sweet of a guy I am, and I was holding her hand, and I said to her softly, with like 20 people surrounding us. I mean, they were paying attention, but it wasn't exactly private. I said to her, softly, "Is it okay if I kiss you?" And just out of nowhere, she puts a huge lip lock on me, and we kiss for probably a good 10 seconds, and I could just feel the sparks fly all around us when we had that kiss. And I was just like, "Oh my God, I never felt like this before. This is amazing." And I was just standing there with my mouth gaping open, and I was just, "Okay, now what?" And we exchanged phone numbers, and she texted. We decided we were going to be texting each other to you know make sure that we keep our communication. And up until this very day, I don't have any regrets meeting her.
Good. It sounds like it's a real match made in heaven, and the fact you both got the same condition as well kind of gives each of you a really good inside view of how each other will be as well. A good understanding. So it's
Yeah.
totally that yin and yang relationship you've got going on there, which is fantastic. And now you're living together, and are there any plans for the future, Mike? Or would you
Well,
not disclose it right now?
well, as of right now, we're just trying to see where things go. We only started living together about a couple months ago, but we're she's already super excited about all the holidays that we're spending together for the first time in the same house. And I think it's really great how far our relationship has come. We've come to grow a better understanding of each other, even though her family is a little odd. But I I care more about what Nancy thinks than what her family thinks of me. I try everything I can to get her family's approval, to try to uh, be friends with them. But it's at the point now where it's like, what? It's like, what the hell? I've there's no point in me even trying anymore. So all I ever really care about is how well Nancy and I go together, and we make each other laugh. probably I make her laugh more than I do because I'm constantly trying to find ways to make her smile every day, just to help her look at a more positive view on life. Because for the past 5 years, she's been through a lot of a lot of hellish things that I can't even describe, and it makes me feel really, really bad for her that she's had such a troubled life. And I want to do everything I can to make sure that her um, her life is nothing but happy from here on out.
He, I think that's awesome, and I think sometimes framing in terms of the way you put it is you're now coming to terms with however the family feel from externally. Is it? I think sometimes you just have to drown out or phase out those external influences and do exactly what you've done, Mike, which is focus on the internal things, which is yourself and Nancy.
Oh yes, absolutely.
I think that external approval, shall we say, from other family members will come, when they see, that, you're looking after the baby girl, or you're looking after the sister, or, you start to have a family together. It takes time to grow, and it does in any relationship, and it does in any family as well,
Yeah.
in the relationships, and certainly with my wife's family, it's taken time to grow and evolve those kinds of relationships. Whereas with family, they evolve naturally anyway. They grow through time, and that's exactly what will happen, with yourself and with Nancy. I just want to go back though, Mike, if I can, just to the point of where you were going, for that independent move. What was
Mm-hmm.
that like for you? What was how obviously it took huge amounts of bravery and courage for you to make that leap of faith, but what was everybody else's beliefs and perceptions around that, Mike? And how was it for you staying in the house on your own that first night, knowing that this is independent Mike and this is the beginning of a new journey for me?
Well, the independence, living on my own, actually first started when I was in college, before I moved into this apartment. And I think probably the biggest concern was making sure that I eat healthy, which unfortunately was probably my biggest concern as well. Um, but the other concern was how I would use my money, because my father, as I said before, keeps track of all my finances and my expenses. And um, I was very terrible at choosing um, proper things to eat. I would constantly eat out at like McDonald's or Burger King or Wendy's, or all the different fast food chains. And when I started college, my first week, oh my god, I was absolutely homesick for like a month, to the point where I was super depressed. I missed my family. I hated the fact that I could only speak to them through the phone. I couldn't see them in person. And there was actually one time in the middle of my first semester at my college, my my sister and my father came to visit, and I think it was my 20th birthday at the time. And well, when when my sister and my father were about to leave, my father started crying, and I could tell that when he was hugging me, I could like feel the tears running down his face onto my head. And he got into the car, and I was just like, "Well, Dad, why are you crying?" And he just said to me, "I really missed my son, and I miss you so much. It's so different without you being around, and it's not the same without you." And my father actually was crying on the way home, and my sister was trying to keep him calm. But when he left, I actually cried quite a bit when he left. But fortunately, my roommate that I had at the time was he was there to comfort me, and he understood about my homesickness because he lived much further away from home, and he said that he said he was there for me if I needed anything. So at that time, I had a really good roommate, but when I was living in an apartment by myself for like the last year that I was in college, I enjoyed the privacy because there were roommates that I had that I just didn't fit with, because they just, oh my God, they either they were either huge potheads or they were criminals. And I actually had a roommate that smoked so much pot that it gave me migraines, and my landlord actually could smell it outside the apartment. And I was like, oh my God, I hope I don't get in trouble for this too. But I told him that it was my roommate that was smoking the pot, and that I swear on my life it wasn't me, because I never smoked a cigarette or a joint in my life, and I don't plan on it in the future, especially since it gives me headaches. So when my landlord decided to give me an apartment all to myself, which was a huge help to help me focus on my work in college, I had a less worrying about food going missing and certain possessions of mine going missing, and worrying less about my own safety. Because there was one time when I had two roommates that recently got out of jail. I think it was for breaking and entering somewhere. I don't recall entirely, but there was one time I left to go to class, and I was gone for probably only about 2 hours, and then I come back and I find out that my PlayStation 3 is gone, and that my two roommates are missing, and one of them comes back with an empty school bag, and I try to say something to the security desk up front, and they're like, oh, he would never do such a thing like this. He would never steal, blah, 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 blah. But I found out that they did steal my PlayStation 3, and they took it to a local pawn shop, and I had to fill out a police report and everything, and those two idiots got themselves arrested. So, oh my God. College was probably a little bit tougher living on my own than me living on my own here in my home area, because here at least I'm surrounded by family, but out in Pittsburgh, I had nobody but probably one or two people that I could trust. And college was probably one of the most difficult things I went through socially, because I was trying really hard to get along with people and try to make friends, but there was only one guy that I ever really became really good friends with, and he had his own place where he was living with his fiance at the time, and we would constantly hang out, play video games, and it was probably the one thing that helped me get away from all the stresses of college and living on my own. He would always be happy to hang out with me, and unfortunately, I found out at one point that his fiance left him for his best friend, and he was really upset, and he really needed a friend to talk to and hang out with. And I was really glad to be there for him to help him through it all. And unfortunately, he had to move back home to Ohio after all that happened. But in spite of everything that happened, I'm just glad that even now he and I are still friends, and we still communicate on every now and again.
So it sounds to me like your journey, in Pittsburgh itself was one that just probably built, was something that built up your experience in life, which now fulfills you as you are now, has informed your journey going forward. That you probably will never put yourself in that situation.
Oh, hell no.
And it's a lesson learned as well, which is fantastic indeed.
Yeah, college was definitely a rude awakening for me. I mean, I did have a lot of good times, but there were also a lot of bad times, like with everything else. And honestly, living on my own in Pittsburgh was probably the closest thing I got to getting like a small preview of what it's like to live out in the real world on my own. It was a difficult road, but it's one of the reasons I'm in the position I'm in now. And I wish I could go back and change a few things, but gotta leave what's in the past and just look forward towards the future, and make sure you don't repeat history.
No, absolutely, Mike. I just want to go back as well, Mike, really just to offer some of my own comments and some of my own personal thoughts, Mike, in terms of that experience with your dad when he was dropping you off. And as a dad myself, and having, for your dad having been on that journey with you in terms of, he's your dad, he's your father, he's brought you up. He's seen that you've had a diagnosis of Aspergers, and he's on this journey with you. He's there fighting your corner for you, and anybody gives you any shit, he's there and he's sorting it out. Suddenly that paradigm changes. There's a challenge to that paradigm, and that's that Mike is going to go and he's going to do this for himself. And I can only imagine the swelling of emotion, just even thinking about the possibility, the swelling of emotion of, dropping one of my boys off into the big wide world, and not seeing them for even 24 hours, bothers me. So how that must have felt for your dad on the way home, and how it must, amazing, and if anything, Mike, I would say to you, it just goes to show the amount of love that your family have for you. And that love itself is the thing that should wrap itself around you and just let you know when you go to sleep at night, that's how they think and feel about you, because so many people maybe don't get that warm, gooey feeling from their own parents, maybe become detached, or so I think that's fantastic, and I know I would be just like your dad as well. So kudos to your dad, and kudos to you for sharing that story as well. Now, we've been interviewing now for nearly an hour and a half, Mike.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin to wrap this up, Mike, and I'm going to ask you a key question I ask all of my guests, which would be, what would Mike now turn round to himself, if he was able to travel back in time using Doctor Who's TARDIS, what would you say to yourself, Michael? What would you advise other people on their journey? You know, if they're if they're given the diagnosis of Aspergers or autism, what would give me 3 pieces of advice?
Well, the first piece of advice that I would give is never give up at all, because if you strive hard enough, you will find a way to overcome even the worst possible odds. The second would be to constantly challenge yourself, to push yourself further. That also goes along with never giving up, constantly pushing yourself forward, striving to be better and better, so that you can show the world that you can accomplish just about anything despite any sort of limitations that you have. And I guess the third would be to, just try to look through life as positively as you possibly can. Look at everything that you have all around you and not worry so much about what you don't have. And especially when it comes to family and friends, embrace every family member and every friend that you have, because you have no idea how long you'll have them. And there have been times that I do regret not spending more time with certain family and certain friends. And I wish I could go back and do more for those people. But the fact that I have what I have now and still have this massive amount of support, I couldn't be happier.
Good for you. Absolutely, and I think those are sage-like pieces of advice as well. Just to strive out and challenge the paradigm and challenge yourselves, which I think is absolutely key, Mike. And I know that I've been watching your YouTube channel. When I'm looking for guests for DisabilityReel, and I've been really impressed, and I've been really heartened by the openness and your honesty and your willingness to share your journey, the negatives and the positives, and I think there are plenty of both in your narrative that you provide for your YouTube channel, Mike. So tell us just, for those people who are watching this now, how do they find Mike's YouTube channel?
Well, the best way that people can find me is if they just look for Let's Plays and just an autism video, and want any sort of advice or want to know experiences about my life, because there are some experiences that I have not mentioned in this interview that I definitely would love to talk about with anybody that's interested. And definitely for all my fans that are watching this interview, I definitely have great thanks for them supporting my channel, and definitely look to seeing more in the future, because I want to try the best I can to help as many people as possible and raise as much awareness on autism as I possibly can, and help as much people as I can, so that they can have successful and successful lives just like I do right now.
So if you want to be a part of Mike's journey, make sure that you subscribe to Mike's channel and see how Mike is progressing on his journey and how he's sharing his story with you guys, so that you can be a part of him. And go and speak to Mike, ask Mike the questions, because Mike is very open and honest and will come back to you as well. And Mike, full kudos and credit to you for that as well. And that's the same as what I'm trying to do here as well, Mike, with DisabilityReel, which is I'm trying to share the journey of people with multiple types and physical and mental disabilities, to try and get the word out that these people such as yourself are inspirational people and overcome challenges all the time, and there are positives in everything. You know, we got a very negative condition for my son's condition, and what we decided to do was to turn all of those negatives into positives. And like there are battling conditions every day who are overturning those negatives into positives, and that they're striving and they're stretching themselves and they're setting examples, you know, to everybody in society, other disabled individuals, and also what we'll call as normal individuals as well. You know, who,
Yeah.
you know, going back to your comment earlier, Mike, couch potatoes. You know, let's put it like that. There are people out there who are striving to prove a point that, you know, there is equality, and in fact, it's going beyond equality now for people who struggle with, you know, any form of disability. They're actually setting and leading by example, and it's probably about time that those couch potatoes sat up and took some notice. So, Mike, I've really enjoyed this interview with you, and I appreciate thank you for your honesty and your openness and your willingness to share. How's this interview been for you, Mike?
It's been a pleasure doing this interview with you, Paul, and I definitely hope that we'll speak to each other more in the future, because this is probably one of the best interviews I've done so far, and I think it's very meaningful what you're trying to do, and I would definitely be happy to help you out with this. And I'm really glad I was able to be a part of this interview. This was a really great opportunity. So thank you for making me a part of this.
You know, it's been my pleasure, Mike. It absolutely, truly has. And, you know, I'd love to get Nancy on the show as well, and maybe we can discuss that offline.
Oh, yes.
But one of the things that I've noticed while doing these interviews is, you know, such as yourself, and also for other families and individuals who suffer from conditions, is that these kinds of discussions and these type of interviews also help frame for the individuals themselves as well, you know, the experiences that they've had, and allows maybe some of these things to go into the right pigeonholes and some of the right compartments, whereas maybe sometimes it hadn't, you know, been processed. And one of the things would be is that when people pass compliments on in terms of, I can't believe how you do it, you're an inspiration, you know, you'll hear those kinds of comments quite a lot, but actually very few people will actually take on board those comments and will maybe push them to one side because they even feel it's condescending, or it's, you know, it's not a genuine statement and comment. But I think by doing these interviews and allowing people to frame themselves and understand how they've overcome and how they've, you know, got this positive mentality, this winning attitude in terms of, this is what I want to do, this is where I want to go, this is my life then, and this is how it is now, really helps people kind of really understand and appreciate themselves for who they are, rather than have somebody in the street tell them how they think they should see themselves. And you know, I think that's very important as well, not just for the watching audience, but also for the person being interviewed as well. But
oh, yes.
allows them just to take some heart in terms of who you are as an individual. And Mike, you know, that is yourself. I found your YouTube channel and this interview absolutely fantastic, and you should take a look at yourself in the mirror and be very proud of who you are. And I'm completely in awe and gobsmacked by it. And I know we're going to stay in touch. I want to do a follow-up video with you, and I want to get Nancy on the channel too.
Oh, yes, absolutely. That would absolutely be great. I think Nancy would have her own story to tell that I think some of our viewers would find pretty interesting to know.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant, Mike. Well, everybody, this has been Disability Reel. If you like what you've seen, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. Got any questions for myself or for Mike, put them into the comment section. I'll make sure that any questions for Mike make their way to Mike. We'll take comments, whether they're positive or whether they're negative. Make sure that you share this as well amongst your friends and your families, the carers and the professionals that you come up against, so that Mike's story is shared, it's informed, and that other people can feel part of Mike's journey as well. So for everybody watching Disability and for Mike,